Thanks for being with us on AM Agenda. With me now, Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer and Labor MP Nick Champion. Guys, thank you both for your time.
Hi, Kieran.
Kelly,
Hi, Kieran.
a letter of support for the government on carbon pricing from a dozen top economists, Saul Eslake from the Grattan Institute, Bill Evans from Westpac, a couple of senior figures here.
Well, look, it's an interesting letter. It's a letter that's been published by the WWF. Obviously, these economists have expressed their own political views. They've got every right to contribute to the debate. But I think the real question here is, what do the Australian people think about this new carbon tax? Of course, it wasn't a blanket approval for the carbon tax. I think if you actually read the detail of it, they said that they actually preferred an ETS model, not a carbon tax model. But the real question here is, this should be brought before the Australian people. There needs to be an election where the Australian people can consider whether in fact they do want to introduce a carbon tax. Julie Gillard lied at the last election. She lied. She said she wouldn't introduce it, and yet we know she's going to bring it in before the 1st of July next year.
WWF, of course, the World Wildlife Fund, not the Wrestling Federation.
We'll just clarify that.
We should clarify that. Let's actually play a grab of Tony Abbott making, well, a similar point, similar lines. He spoke to the Minerals Council yesterday.
I know none of you like being political activists. You are miners, not political activists, and that's as it should be. But I say to you that at this time you need to become political activists, at least for a few months, at least for a couple of years, if you are going to be able to continue to be the miners that you want to be and that Australia needs.
Nick Champion, Tony Abbott there urging the mining sector to show the same sort of resolute opposition as they did last year quite successfully against the government on the mining tax.
Well, look, this calls for an election, going out there campaigning with the minerals industry. It's all futile in the end. Last year, earlier this year, I think Joe Hockey went to the National Press Club and said, eventually or inevitably we'll end up pricing carbon, and that's the truth. We will end up pricing carbon, and we'll end up doing it through a market mechanism, and if it's not done now, it will be done by a future Liberal government. You can bet your bottom dollar on it. All of this opposition is confected, it's illogical, it's unreasonable, and you see the letter from the economists who say it's not political opposition, it's economics. It's the best way to deal with this problem is to price carbon.
You have to actually make the cases to why is it that we need to do this now? The rest of the world isn't doing it now. Why is it that we need to put the Australian economy at risk, put jobs at risk? Why do we need...
The whole of Europe has got a price on carbon. New Zealand has got a price on carbon.
Just on that, we
know that American states are looking at price on carbon.
Till 2025.
Without doubt, we will end up with a price mechanism on carbon,
but Nick,
and it will be a market
challenge. What Kelly said there is your challenge in large part to say that explain that Australia is not going out on its own, because you talk about the American states and New Jersey last week pulled out of that deal.
Well, you've got to remember, we accept that challenge, and the Prime Minister went to the Minerals Council last night and made the case. She's gone out to the Australian people and is making the case, and we have others, and now we have economists making the case. And what are they making the case for? For a market mechanism, for a price on carbon, because we can't let the planet burn. Everybody knows the science is in. Everybody knows that if you're going to deal with this problem sensibly, you don't do it through massive taxpayer subsidies. You do it through a market mechanism.
We have less than 1.4% of the world's emissions. Less than 1.4% of the world's emissions. Julie Gillard did go to the Minerals Council last night. There was a totally toxic reception to the government last year. It was slightly less than toxic this year, but still toxic nonetheless. The Minerals Council came out and said this is the most aggressive carbon plan in the world. In the world. You want us to lead the world. You want us to export jobs. You want to damage our economy. You want to hurt the mining industry.
What they said, though, in terms of the comment that I played at the start of the show, and they do sound a lot more conciliatory than they have done in the past. In terms
going from very toxic to toxic.
No, but let me ask you the question. I'm not saying it's a win by any stretch. What they want is greater compensation for trade-exposed industries. Beyond that, though, Peter Johnson made it clear that he was open to it.
No. They don't want a carbon tax because, why should Australia be going ahead of the rest of the world? We need to understand here, Nick, that we are not going to...
Look, this line that you run about being ahead of the world is just nonsense. We are a high per capita emitter, aren't we? That per head, we're a high. We have got to get this economy on a low carbon trajectory, right? Because if we don't, it will cost us jobs later on. If we don't act now, it costs us more later on.
In rural and regional Australia,
everybody knows that. Everybody knows the science. Everybody knows the science is in.
Let's hear Nick, and then we'll come
everybody
back.
knows the science is in. Everybody knows you need a market mechanism. Everybody knows the longer you leave it, the higher the cost. And the Liberal Party plan, which is about a direct taxpayer subsidy, about crony capitalism, that will cost us $30 billion. And in 2050, it's calculated to cost $18 billion a year. Now, it's just not a sensible or logical response. And your policy is all about papering over all of the divisions, between you
Nick,
and between the climate change deniers in your ranks.
I want to get Kelly to respond to that.
Well,
but Kelly,
those figures aren't correct.
I also want to put to you what Ross Garnaut had said earlier in the week about this being a debate about pre-reform political culture versus the economic reform that we've seen over the last few decades, including under your former boss, Peter Costello.
Well, we have a record of economic reform. We don't have a record of trashing the economy. I mean, these guys couldn't get the installation of pink bats right. How on earth do you think they're going to get, carbon pricing right? It's an absolute no-brainer. Of course, it's not going to be successful. But the real question here is exactly what is the cost? No, just let me finish, Nick. Exactly what is the cost going to be? We hear from Garnaut between $20 and $30 per tonne is going to be the cost. The Greens, of course, who you're in coalition with, say the starting point should be $40, but realistically they want to ratchet that up to $100 pretty quickly and beyond.
Okay,
this cost is going to be incredibly significant. This is going to be a huge structural shift for the Australian economy.
You
don't seem to want to talk about that.
I want to move on to the sexist row that erupted yesterday out of Senate estimates. Penny Wong reacted to a cat call, a meow, as it's been described by Senator David Bushby. Let's play you a little bit of what Penny Wong had to say.
A number of points. The first is that is a witness list, which is
prepared by Treasury.
If I can finish now. Oh yes. Why don't you meow when a woman does that? That's a good idea. That's really, it is just extraordinary. The blokes are allowed to yell, but if a woman stands her ground, you want to make that kind of comment. It's sort of schoolyard politics.
Kelly, was Penny Wong right to stand up for herself in that context, have a go at David Bushby?
Look, Senate estimates is a robust process. A senator made a comment, Penny Wong took offence, he apologised, end of story. I mean, there's nothing more to it than that. But of course, let's not forget exactly why there was such a heated and robust Senate estimates period at that time. It's because the Treasury Secretary didn't want to actually appear before Senate estimates. The government have absolutely used this as much as they can because national accounts was brought down yesterday and we saw a decline in economic growth of 1.2%, which is greater, which is greater than 1991. During the Keating recession.
Let's stick to the sexist issue here, Nick. If Kelly says that, the apology was made, move on. Why not?
Well, look, I'll tell you, the Liberal Party started out the week with a systematic assault on a fine Australian actress, right? So that's the way they started the week, by verbally and attacking Cate Blanchett. That's the way it started the week. And it is evidence of the systematic misogyny in the Liberal Party. It's a systematic misogyny. Them starting out verballing and attacking a fine Australian actor, Cate Blanchett, then didn't get stuck into Michael Caton, got stuck into Cate Blanchett for having an eco-mansion. Then we move on and we have this ridiculous schoolboy act at Senate estimates by this nobody senator. And then when Tanya Plibersek gets up and makes perfectly reasonable points in the House, she's shouted down. The Liberal Party has a problem with strong women standing the ground. That's why they've got a problem with the Prime Minister.
Well, I didn't note any of this outrage, of course, when Belinda Neal made comments to Sophie Mirabella, and there was no apology provided.
On the contrary,
there have been multiple
there was a privileges committee. There was a privileges committee into
of the Labor Party refusing to apologise for bad behaviour. The senators apologised. End of story. Move on. I mean, let's talk about the real issues that are actually facing Australians today. Let's talk about the national accounts. Let's talk about the carbon tax you'd like to impose. I know these are very difficult conversations. I know these are very difficult conversations for you.
Let's just get this straight.
I know that you'd like to actually distract us and talk about a whole range of other things, but let's talk about the real issues, because Australians are sick of us focusing on the things that don't matter to them.
Let's just see. Just quickly, we've only got 30 seconds left.
Are you comfortable with an Australian actor coming out and making a perfectly reasonable point, and her being verballed and attacked? Barnaby Joyce was out there saying that Cate Blanchett was going to hurt Australians. That's just wrong. It's wrong, and you should condemn it.
Talk about the big issues.
All right, Nick Champion, Killer Dwyer, thanks for a robust discussion as always. Good to see you both. That's all for AIM Agenda. I'm Kieran Gilbert. See you next time.